Hi, I'm Adam Murphy, Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate here in Wisconsin, and it's time to talk maps, a little bit of gerrymandering. So the Wisconsin Supreme Court just recently passed, or accepted, that's probably a better way to put it, accepted Governor Evers' maps for congressional districts and state assembly and state senate districts here, and rejected the GOP-provided maps from the state legislature. And that seems like a good thing. It's probably best described as less bad, because it's still very gerrymandered. The state Supreme Court required that the new maps have minimal differences, which is not exactly how the Constitution is written. The Constitution says that they're really supposed to be, lines are supposed to be drawn around community lines, city lines, county lines, that sort of thing. And clearly that's not the case. So I want to explain gerrymandering kind of quickly because people still ask about it. And you've probably seen, this is from urbanmilwaukee.com, you've probably seen this graphic a million times before, but I want to explain it very briefly. So if we've got 50 precincts, 60% blue, 40% red, and we had 5 districts that we were looking at, you would say, okay, well, we could make 5 vertical districts and you'd have 3 blue and 2 red, and that would seem fair. It would be 60-40, which is the same thing as the population. Of course, it would be goofy and a little odd to have districts filled with 100% blue or 100% red, and actually that would discourage people from voting. So that's not normally the way it's done. Another option would be this format. So we're taking 10 people into each of these groups, or 10 precincts into each district, and there's 6 blue, there's 4 red, which is arguably fair, quote unquote, but it winds up with 5 blue districts, so you'd have 5 Democratic representatives, which of course is not fair because the population is 60-40. So that would be inappropriate. And this is the way that the maps are often drawn, which is cracking and packing, and I want to explain those two terms. So packing is this district here where you see 9 blue and 1 red, and this district here with 9 blue and 1 red. So they've packed a bunch of blues in there together and sacrificed this 1 red. And what this does is obviously creates 2 very safe blue districts that are going to win, but it also sacrifices this 10% from the red and discourages a whole lot of these blue from voting, because if they know that they're going to win 90-10 or 75-25, why would you vote? And so the interesting thing about packing is it actually affects statewide races like my race for Wisconsin's U.S. Senate, because a lot of these people choose not to vote. And we see that here in Wisconsin, in particular in one of the congressional districts, that's Milwaukee, where literally 100,000 fewer people voted than on average in comparison to the other 7 congressional districts, because each congressional district has roughly the same number of people. So if we had consistent voting across the state, and Wisconsin tends to vote pretty well at around 70 to 75%, we would expect 400 or 450,000, something like that, in each one. And literally that district that is packed incredibly blue, and some of it is natural gerrymandering, but some of it is very deliberate, and I'll show it to you. So you have a bunch of people, 100,000 fewer people that voted. Well, imagine that for a moment when Joe Biden just won by 20,000 votes, or the previous election where Donald Trump won by about 20,000 votes. Those 100,000 voters absolutely would have made a huge difference, could have swung Wisconsin under Donald Trump's in 2016, or given Joe Biden a much, much larger victory. And of course, there are some red districts that are also packed, but normally they're not 90-10, right? And we have some in Wisconsin that are close to 90-10, 75-25, somewhere in that range, or even a little bit higher, 80-20, where a lot of people don't vote because their votes don't matter. But then we lose out up at the top level for those statewide races for things like governor, for president, for attorney general, for secretary of state, and for treasurer. So I really, first of all, can't encourage people enough to vote, regardless of how packed your district might be. Your vote is absolutely crucial, and that is certainly the case for my race. So then let's talk packing. So, cracking. So cracking is we cracked these 4 out of this group. Like if this is their community, well, we've cracked them out, or these 2 and these 2 have been cracked together, and they don't necessarily correlate with each other, right? So 2 far reaches from each other that aren't connected don't necessarily belong in the same district. And what it does is it creates this 60-40 split, so 60 red, 40 blue. And that 20% margin is almost impossible to overcome. And that's generally what the Republicans, and Democrats do this too. Please do not get me wrong at all. I'm opposed to gerrymandering no matter what the party is. Illinois Democrats are doing some amazing gerrymandering, and by amazing I mean amazingly bad for Republicans and for Republican voters. Same thing, Maryland. I think it's Maryland. It might be Massachusetts, but I think it's Maryland. So it absolutely happens. And there are, I think, somewhere around 20 states across the country that have independent committees or commissions that are nonpartisan that actually draw the maps. And that makes it fair for the voters. And let me really emphasize that. I don't give a damn about the parties. It's the voters. And the voters, whether you are the lone one vote, 10% Republican that's in this district who the Republicans are sacrificing, or the 9 out of 10 Democrats in here that the Republicans are packing in, or vice versa, it means that you as the voter are being disenfranchised. Your vote doesn't matter. And that's a tragedy, because I would love to see competitive elections, because it would bring out better candidates. Right? So often we have part of the reason that I ran in 2020 is that my state Senate and state assembly generally ran unopposed, because it's a 30-point gerrymander. You're going to lose 65-35. Why would anybody bother? Well, if nobody bothers, nothing changes. So that's very much part of the reason why I ran, and this is the problem that we've got, and this is what Wisconsin gerrymandering looks like. And Wisconsin's one of the worst in the country. So go to Urban Milwaukee, check out this article. It's from 2019. It's called The Future of Wisconsin Gerrymandering. It's a cool one, but you can pull up this sort of thing virtually anywhere and see these same kind of maps. So let's show you what Wisconsin actually looks like. So Journal Sentinel Online, JS Online, has these interactive maps, and they show the current map, so that would be the 2010 map as it stands. They show the one that the GOP legislature proposed, and it also has the Governor Evers one that was accepted. And so you can slide back and forth on the maps. Let me pull these down so you can see them. So on this side over here on the left, I've got the current ones and the new, so the Governor Evers. And on the other side is the current and the legislature's map, so the GOP's map. And here's what's really cool is, so this one over on the right shows the current maps of the 2010 maps. And what it tells you is the current margin. So this 7th District, 19% Republican. Ron Kynes, this is the competitive. So this is, by the way, I'm looking at congressional maps. So these are the 8 House of Representative seats for Wisconsin. And we've generally been 5-3, even though the state is really 50-50. And so if we wanted 4-4, we would have to make some changes. And so it's interesting to look at the map. So again, this is as it stands right now as of 2010. So Ron Kynes is competitive with only 2.4%. Ron Kynes is a Democrat. He's won there several times, but he's retiring. So it's only 2.4% Republican, 16% Republican, 16% Republican. Start to get the sense of where I'm going with these. 19.8% Republican, right? They really love to be in around that 20% mark. Okay, and then you've got these 3 down here. So 39% Democrat, so that includes Madison. You get into Milwaukee, and 51, almost 52% Democrat for Gwen Moore. And again, cities are generally going to be more Democrat. Rural areas are going to be more conservative. There's natural gerrymandering, but there's also very deliberate gerrymandering. And then Brian Stiles in the 1st Congressional District at 9.9%, so about at 10%. So not very competitive, but possible in the right scenario. So this is how it stands currently. I'm going to pull this one over here so that we've got the same map. And then let me show you what the legislature proposed. Okay, so here's their proposal. Doesn't look dramatically different. So went from 18.9% to 15.9%, so they were willing to sacrifice a little bit, but 16% is still pretty solid. In 8, from 16.1 to 15.1, so again, little sacrifice. Here's where things get interesting. It went from 2.4% to 5%. It doesn't seem like much, but that's pretty significant when Ron Kynes generally is only won by 1 to 2%. So they were gunning to make this one less competitive. All right, in the middle here, 16% to 16.8%, so kept it about the same. The Democrat map in District 2, 39.4% to 42%. So they packed more Democrats in there. So that 42% means that there's a 42% win margin, or margin of victory. So what does that equal? 42, 58, 29% to 71%. So again, packing more people in there. Okay, so they moved Waukesha in that area 22.1%, whereas it had been 19.8%. So that one's, they made a little bit safer, which is an interesting thing to have seen. Again, Bryan-Stiles was 9.9%, and they kept that right at 9.8%. And then let's look at Milwaukee. Went from 51.9% for Gwen Moore to 49.9%. So they actually unpacked ever so slightly on that one. But overall, you'll see that their goal was to move this one legislative map to give them a better chance to win that one. All right, so now let me show you. I'm going to switch this side to current. Hey, you know what? Let's leave this one. I'll tell you what, let's leave this one on the state legislature, and let's move this one now to the Governor Evers map. It doesn't seem dramatically different, but you see some different lines, this section down in here in comparison to where it is over here. So let's go through it again. And the Governor Evers map, like I said, it's less bad. It still favors Republicans. So 18.9%, the GOP had it down to 15.9% because they don't need that much. So there's a little more packing, arguably, going on here. And again, Democrats do this too. 15.7% to 15.1%, so that one's pretty close. Ron Kynes, okay, so Ron Kynes, they kept Congressional District 3 at 2.4% to make it competitive, whereas the Republicans wanted to move it to 5%. So that's one of the big differences. 16.4% to 16.8%, so about the same. The Madison area, 40.8% to 42%, so slightly different, well, a little over 1% difference, but again, not dramatically. Okay, the Republicans had Waukesha at 22.1%. Now here's where a little bit of a change happened. And it's at 27%, and you can see the other had this purple that kind of came up in here. So let's see what that does to Congressional District 1. So 5th Congressional District, Waukesha, in that area, Waukesha County, is still going to be red, but instead of 22, it's 27. So again, a little packing. 49.9% for the Republicans from Milwaukee to 50.3%. So they kept Gwen Moore about the same place. She's going to win 75-25, and a whole lot of Democrats are still not going to come out and vote. And here's the interesting one. Okay, 1st Congressional District, which is Bryan-Stiles, 9.8%, and remember he was at 9.9% in the current map, so the Republicans were trying to keep that safely 10%, 55-45 in their favor. By moving things around, it's now a 2% Republican, which makes it competitive. It puts it in play with Congressional District 3. So now it means that there's a possibility, with only a 2% movement, of the state actually being 50-50 for its congressional seats. And I think that's cool. I mean, I would love to see overall for things to be more fair, but again, there is natural gerrymandering that's going to happen, and so it might not be feasible. Could we maybe get one more? Could we possibly have 3 competitive? I think that could be feasible, but at least we're going to have 2. So now let me show you the state legislature, the assembly districts. And I'm not going to go through all of these by any stretch of the imagination. There are 99 assembly districts and 33 Senate districts. But as you look at the map, I just want to explain it. So each of the bordered out areas is an assembly map, and each Wisconsin State Senate is made up of 3 assembly districts, so that's the colors. So that's why you'll see 3 of them grouped together. And again, we've got Governor Evers and the current. And over here, I zoomed down in, and this is Kenosha and Racine area. And I wanted to zoom in this to really show you just what gerrymandering really looks like and how effective it can be. So first of all, look at these lines that are drawn in here, right? And I know this box keeps popping up, but look at these lines. I mean, they are street by street in some cases, almost house by house. And again, we have a tremendous amount of data on voters. So they were able to very specifically go in and draw out these lines exactly the way that they wanted in order to pack and crack, because here's what these districts used to look like. So you'll see that there's this one Senate district that goes Kenosha to Racine along the lakefront. And then you have these other 2 districts out here for the assembly. And they're safely red, right? 17%, 18% red, 17%, 20%. And if you look at the blue ones, they're 20% blue, 11% blue, 23% blue. That one's very blue at 40%. So what's interesting is that these used to be the entire county. So Racine County was a district. Kenosha County was a district. Well, that made them competitive because, again, you'll see this 21% might have offset this 23%. So all of a sudden it was competitive. And this is what the GOP changed in 2010. So this is already the case. Let me show you what they're proposing. It's not dramatically different. Everything stays pretty much the same. But what that did is that it created a very safe blue district, which you say, oh, well, Adam, that's good for you guys, right? And it created very safe red districts. Because they're safe, they're not competitive. Because they're safe, voters don't matter. That's the problem. So what the Republicans did, and in particular, if memory serves, there was somebody, former, I think member of maybe the Assembly, maybe the Senate, State Senate, that lost, and so they moved the roads and moved the maps to include his house out here in this Republican area so that he could get his seat back. Funny how that works. But it created two very safe spaces where there's no competition, a very blue one and a very red one, instead of having two arguably cool, competitive areas. And we can make the argument that the people of Racine City and Racine County have things in common. Oh, I don't know, say like county taxes and county roads. Same thing with the city of Kenosha and Kenosha County. They have things in common. The people in the city of Racine and the city of Kenosha, yeah, they're both small cities and they both have things in common, but they're not tied together. And certainly this area that happens in between with the Village of Summers doesn't have anything to do with it, but it was a convenient way to draw the line for the GOP. So that's what they did. Let me show you Governor Evers just because I'm curious. I don't know that that changed much. Actually, it looks like that's still the case down there. So I'm kind of looking at this little district down here. So there weren't many changes. There were some. And I think, so we're looking at still 61 of the 99 districts lean Democrat because this Wisconsin Supreme Court said you can't change the lines much. You have to try to keep them as close as to what they already are. Well, they were already incredibly gerrymandered. They were already incredibly bad. So this is less bad, and it's certainly far less bad than what the GOP had proposed. So that's better. So let me give you one last piece of information here, and then I will let you play. I'm going to scroll up in these. So hop into these maps. They're really cool, and you can get right down to your street and your home. So over here on the side, it tells you that under the GOP legislature's map, Democrats would have needed to win by 12.4%. So they would have had to have a win of a little over 56% to just under 44% in order to get to 50-50, just to get to even though Wisconsin is a 50-50 state. So they would have had to gotten a 56-44 roughly. Well, the Evers maps are only 7.4%, so it's still a huge margin. It's still a large amount that the Democrats would have to cover, again, just to get to even. This doesn't guarantee anything more than that. But 7.4% is possible. 12.4% is virtually impossible. 7.4% is small margin, very, very slim chance of it happening, but it's at least possible. And that's why I want to explain this to you, because the next video that I'm going to do, I'm going to head over to the whiteboard and we're going to talk strategy about how, as Democrats, voters, as people that believe in fairness, right? Democrat, Republican, Independent, I don't care. If you believe in fair, what can we do to possibly, we're not going to be able to change the maps. These are locked in. There's possibly still a federal lawsuit, so I want to leave that out there. That is still a potential. But at least for 2020, these maps look like they are locked in. So how can we encourage people to vote, especially in those areas where they are highly packed and discouraged from voting? So, like I said, I'm going to have that strategy conversation. Hop into JS Online, take a look at the maps. Leave me your comments, throw me your questions. We are always happy to ask or to answer them, and to ask you questions as well. So, thank you again. I appreciate it. Take care. Have a good weekend.